Hey, welcome back to JG3 Reviews, where we explore the world of fountain pens, ink, and paper. And today, it's fountain pen day. Now, I like a good pocket pen. That's a pen that either is tough enough and small enough to fit in a jeans pocket, maybe even small enough to fit in that fifth pocket of a pair of jeans, and one that is durable. Or I also like one like this, a pocket pen that will fit in a shorter, more modern shirt pocket on, say, a business casual or dress shirt, because not all full-size fountain pens even fit in some of the modern shirt pockets. This is the Majohn RS3, a pen with a vintage vibe and a little bit of modern flair, and a full-size number 6 nib. If your nib actually shows up in the package when you get your pen. I'll explain that later. But this is the Majohn RS3. This is bamboo green, which I think also looks like a really cool vintage jade green. Very neat design and some things that I like about it. And so we're going to go over the features of the pen, the design of the pen, how the pen writes. Although, let me give you a little bit of hint ahead of time, this one does not write like a standard RS3, and it goes back to that missing nib in the shipping problem. So let's spin the camera and we'll go over all that. Now, when my pen first arrived, it came in the box. And, this is a nice presentation box. Simple tin box, nothing fancy, but nice for a gift. Now, before we go farther into the design of the pen, let's stay with the box for a second, because when my pen arrived, I opened it up, excited to see that number 6 nib. However, it wasn't there. So just imagine you open up this pen and there's no nib and no feed. The collar of the nib unit was in the pen, just the feed and the nib were missing. Now, I immediately contacted the seller, who was very apologetic and gave me a way to get a nib and feed replacement. So they handled it well. These things can happen, and it really didn't upset me, except that, now my review is about a month to 5-6 weeks behind as I've waited. And I ended up actually not waiting until that nib unit arrives, because I actually haven't gotten it yet. It ought to be here soon, but I was too impatient at that point. So what did I do? I had an extra Majohn Flex-Nib sitting around, but I didn't have a feed at first that would work. I looked at a couple of Majohn pens that maybe I could scavenge from, but they were not adaptable to a cartridge converter pen. Those were pens that had feeds made for eyedroppers and piston pens and things like that. So I had to go digging deep into my storage of pen parts, and I found from about 5 or 6 years ago a partial package of feeds for a Jinhao, and I thought, you know what? Let's see if that works. I pop it in and it fits the pen just fine. The converter fits it just fine. And then I go grab the nib and I put it in, and guess what? It actually works. Now, the ink flow does not quite keep up with the Flex-Nib as well as I would like, so this is just a temporary solution, but hey, it is a solution. So I'll show you all of that as we get to the writing test. But let's go over the design now. So first, I think this has several things about it that are a little bit of a mishmash of vintage pens. Some people will immediately see the hexagon shape of the barrel and think Kaweco, and I can understand that. There's also a vintage looking finial at the top, and then you have this rounded barrel. Now, I'll show you in a minute that it doesn't match a Kaweco Sport at all in its design in the whole. There might be things that remind you of that pen, but it's not actually a copy of a Kaweco Sport. Now, there may be a vintage pen that looks much more like in total, but you'll see them side by side, and that's not a match. Anyway, I do like the overall design, and I love the classic feel so much that I really wish they made this in a black and gold trimmed pen for an even more vintage vibe. Although the clip is not very vintage looking. Well, I say that. It's not vintage like 40s, 50s like the rest of the pen looks. That clip looks very 1990s premium outlets Mikasa clock. I don't know why, but it took me back to following my wife around a Mikasa shop in a premium outlet somewhere outside of Boston in the early 2000s. Anyway, that's the look to me, and it functions well. As some others have noted, unfortunately, the fulcrum is too far back for you to be able to push here and use this to open up the clip. So that's too bad, but it does work well and goes over the shirt pocket or pen loop as it should, and it holds well and I've had very good experience with the pen carrying it on the daily. I mentioned the bamboo green in the intro, and you can see that that color is nicely done. It's a nice natural looking green. It does remind me more of a lighter jade color than it does even bamboo, but that's just my eye. I do think it looks really good, and the way that they have smoothed the edges and the parts, I think reinforces some of that vintage feel that I like in this pen. The cap comes off, and let's see, there was about one and a little over 1.5, 1 3/4 maybe. It also screws on to post. Now at first my clip was not lined up, but that was easily adjustable so that it lines up when it's posted. And then it's comfortable in hand. It doesn't make a very long pen even when it's posted, but for my hand it fits quite well and is a very comfortable pen to write with. So the ergonomics to me are good, and that's partly aided by a nice smooth grip section. It's maybe a little longer than you might have expected from a pocket pen, and that makes this an even more comfortable pen, and the material itself lends to that as well. Now, being a number 6 nib, that means you also are farther back from the paper, which some of y'all know I like and is more unusual in pocket pens. But, you know, there are some other pocket pens like Gravitas that I mentioned before that have number 6 nibs in these small pens, and I'm always a fan. Not just because of the aesthetics of it, but because to me, that makes for a more pleasant pen to write with. It also gives you a lot of options for swapping, like putting in this Flex-Nib in your pocket pen, which is kind of a serendipity because while it wasn't the plan, I am good with this fix. Now, when we take the barrel off, we will find that it has a silicone ring, so that means you should be able to eyedropper this pen just fine, I bet. It'll also help in preventing leaks, and you see it has a shortened Majohn converter included, which means you can use your own inks even more easily, although you could also eyedropper compatible cartridges, and that would not be a big deal. But the inclusion of the shortened converter is major points for Majohn. And I do have to remind you as we look at the nib that this is not the standard Majohn nib. I'll include a link in the description to another Majohn pen that has their number 6 nib just so you can see what those write like. But this is the new Flex-Nib, an affordable steel Flex-Nib that has really hit the market with a splash because it really works well. Now the feed is a plastic Jinhao replacement, and like I said, it doesn't keep up well enough on the ink, but it does get the job done. I just write a little bit slower. You could find other feeds that will fit in this. I got an ebonite feed hoping it would work, but I could not get it all the way into the nib collar without doing some damage. I think I'm going to sand it down. I think the diameter is just a touch off. But this one is working now as a temporary fix quite well. In terms of standard nibs, I think Majohn generally has a good number 6 nib out of the box. And like I said, it does give you some swapping capabilities beyond this nib. For our size comparison, we have that Majohn RS3, the Scrivener EDC, another excellent pocket pen, the Kaweco Ice Sport in blue, which I really wish they'd bring back, you know, that color line. And then another Majohn, the 80 Mini, which is a miniature Parker 45 clone that Majohn put out quite a while back. Now, in uncapped form, some of these pens are too short to even really fit on my pen stand here very easily, but you get the idea. It is a short pen. It's not that much longer, even with that number 6 nib, than the Kaweco Sport or that 80 Mini. Then when you post this pen, you see that actually it comes out the shortest of these, and that's a surprise. It doesn't feel that way in hand, but it actually is the shortest when it's posted. All right. A little bit of a dry start here. And I am going to remind you that this is not the standard Majohn or the standard Majohn feed, so you are going to see a couple of flukes here. This is kind of a Franken pen. So again, check out the video of another Majohn that I'll link in the description to see what their standard feed and nib should be like. This is again their Flex-Nib. And even though, again, this is an odd fix, that's the wetness when the flow is right. Now, like I said, this feed itself is not made for this kind of a nib. I'll stop apologizing. Ink today is a great one, a favorite one of mine. That is the Iroshizuku Shin-ryoku. Now I'm going to go slow and show you a little bit of what the nib can do here. It's a nice capability to have in that pocket pen. This is no pressure whatsoever. That is very light pressure, moderate pressure, and feed's not quite keeping up with it. Here we go. A little bit more pressure. It does work well in normal writing. There you go. And as you can see, you get this nice flex with just a little bit of effort, and that's why people really like this nib. Now, I'm having trouble with my equipment. I've had to record this video twice completely. So let me show you a sheet from the other time that I recorded this, and I can show you kind of how it did in the speed test and everything. So every now and then it doesn't keep up. You can see it railroaded here and here, and that's just because it's a makeshift setup. So, I think if I had used a Majohn feed with this nib, I would not have that problem. And that's based on my experience with the Flex-Nib in my other Majohn pen that has a Majohn feed. That one keeps up beautifully. So I think that's all that is. And I could deepen that channel in the feed and fix this. And if I decide to keep that feed in it, that is what I will do. But overall, performance of the pen has been better than the performance of my iPhone as I've tried to record this. So very good. Anyway, very handy pen, and I really do like it. I actually would have liked a retro clip instead of the modern one, but I think I know what they're going for there, and I can understand it. I think this bamboo green looks great. Again, I think a black one would have looked fantastic. But hey, they also have galaxy blue. They've got a darker green. They've got some other colors as well. It's a great looking pen. It feels great in the hand. It's a pleasant writing experience. And I actually like this nib and it better than I would have the standard one, I think, anyway. So it gives you that option as well. Now, what do you think? Are you a pocket pen fan? And are you a Flex-Nib fan? Or would you rather have it in just that standard nib offering? And what color would you choose? Share all that in the comments below along with your experience of this pen or others that you think would be even better and that maybe I ought to check out. I hope you're all having a wonderful week. God bless you, and I'll see you in the comments and in the next review.